Hi, my name's Julie. I'm here to share my cancer story with you today. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2009. My story is a little bit different to some of the other ones you'll hear in the way that it shows you that other external events can affect your cancer journey, such as your divorce, I had a traumatic bereavement as well in the middle, and basically just to give you a few tips and show you how I dealt with things in my life. Hopefully you'll get something from this, and I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Julie, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate you coming to share your story with myself and the viewers on the Cancer Stories programme. Let's get straight into it, if you don't mind, about what's happened to you from 2009 onwards. How was your cancer picked up initially?
I went with quite a positive attitude for screening, as most ladies do. My first ever mammogram in my life, and it came early. On the NHS, they normally are given, I think, at age 50. I actually made a joke with my colleagues about it. I remember very vividly saying, wow, mine's come early. I'm only 49. Why am I being sent for? Happy birthday. So I go for the mammogram, and I'm not expecting a bad result. There was no history of breast cancer in my family. I self-examined regularly. I didn't find any lumps. Then I was recalled. I still didn't have any concern until I actually got to the appointment at the Glenfield in Leicester, and I realised I was in for quite a long appointment. The mammogram had picked up changes in my left breast, and basically I spent about 4 hours there, having various mammograms, ultrasound, a punch biopsy, a core biopsy at the time, which was a very painful process, I have to say, being completely honest. And then I left, and I was told that they were dealing with possible cancerous area, but they didn't know how much. On a negative side of the visit, I was told by a doctor who I later nicknamed Dr. Blunt because it was a variance of her name. When I asked the question, what would happen next, meaning what would happen next at that appointment, because I'd had various tests, there was no literature to tell you what to expect. Unfortunately, it doesn't tell you that you'll be in clinic, you'll have an ultrasound, you'll have a biopsy. For all I knew, to all intents and purposes, I could have been hoiked off somewhere else and had some surgery right there and then. So I asked the obvious question, what happens next? To which I was bluntly told, well, we don't leave it in there, it's got to come out. Which obviously I understood, but I thought that was a little bit full on, to be treated that way in a very emotional situation, because I call it the 11 o'clock appointment now, which adds humour to what was a very traumatic time for me. I remember sitting in a room with my twin sister with me, so obviously we were very close. She was opposite me as the clinician was telling me that actually there were changes in the left breast. And at the time, my husband, in a small room with a clock face looking at me, and I could hear her words that were relative to me, saying, well, actually, you've got, breast cancer. And it was 11 o'clock. So I've never forgotten that moment, and I don't think most cancer patients do, because it's one of those massive moments of your life, for the good or the bad. And I call it the 11 o'clock appointment now, to try and joke, because obviously that's the only way I could get around it, move on. All kinds of thoughts go through your head, really. Am I going to make it? What are the treatments going to be like? Am I going to be physically disfigured? My first thought was my daughter, who was only 8 years old at the time. How will she cope? How will I tell her? I think it's a very difficult thing to go through, because nobody can ever prepare you for that moment, because everybody hopes they'll never have to deal with that. And because of that, it doesn't matter whether you've got close family with you, or how happy you are in your life at that time, or how unhappy you are at that time in your life, it will be something that is a massive thing to deal with. But I think I've proven, being at this stage now, 5 years on, that, you know, you can get through it. Yes, there are things to go through. I think you learn to deal with things in different ways. And I've learned some very useful things along the way, which hopefully I can share with you right now on the video.
That's good to hear. That all those people going through that system and all those people, you know, being processed, is there a kinder way to handle that emotionally difficult episode? Or do you think it's always going to be just difficult because that information is just going to be painful, whatever? But is there a way we can improve things, do you think?
I think that in the main, they have a support nurse there. I remember being extremely distressed in a very public area. I'd like to see some improvement there, really, for people who, you know, there were people coming and going down corridor, very public, people waiting to go in and have their mammogram. You've just been pulled out and you're in floods of tears. It doesn't take Einstein to realise what that is about for those people waiting in the area. Those women have still got to go through that door, have mammograms, or they're on recall, and there's the potential they know they may be being told that news. I'd like to see some different way, really, of logistics of moving patients around, so that the ones that are waiting are not having to see that, other people's distress whilst coping with their own anxiety in a public place. That's a big thing for me that I would like to change. No, you can't avoid the moment of being told. I think that at the time it would be nice to have a bit more support. I know there is a breast care nurse there, and you get taken to a room and you're given a cup of tea and things like that. That's a good thing, I think, you know, to talk to someone and get your distress out. Some people may not react like that. I did personally. I unfortunately had the experience in my life earlier, only 3 or 4 years before that, of losing my own mother with cancer of a different type that I'd nursed. And unfortunately, from news of diagnosis to the end, because of the type of cancer that she had, and because it was well advanced without us knowing about it, because of the type of cancer that it was, and an aggressive one, it was only 6 months for the whole procedure. So for me, that was a double whammy. I felt like I'd been told the same. I was probably going to go down the same route, because that's all you can hear and that's all you can see. And you learn by what you've seen and heard. What you don't see is things like me, necessarily, and even in the press, in the news, the emotive stories of people who have cancer, all different types of cancer, and breast cancer. It's great that it's all out there, people going through that journey. It's a good thing that you see positive things being done, a closeness around it, a friendship of people who are battling, who are succeeding, and some that you don't. But hopefully, like for me in this video now, women out there or other cancer patients will be able to see that actually there is a scale of cancer patients, just like there is in life. But we tend not to focus on that because it's such an emotive, frightening, end of the line type word. And none of us wants to be on that conveyor belt. So basically, you focus on that without realising that in that journey, you know, your journey may be a year, your journey may be 5 years, your journey may be 10 years, you know, it might be 6 months, 3 months. Nobody actually knows that until you've had all the treatments and the biopsies and the scans. But at that moment, when you're told that awful news, you can't think about any of that. You just think, oh, it's the end. It's all happening. It isn't quite the case. It's a little bit more tricky than that. And so, you know, there are positives by getting it out there, getting the right help, the support, you know, emotional, mental support around it when you're struggling, which I'll come to in a bit, that I actually felt the need to have in my life, gets you through, and it's essential. You know, trying to help yourself by, if someone wants to offer to cook you a meal and you're going through chemo and your family and you're worried and you can't lift your head off the pillow, then please take it. Don't be too proud. You may have to reevaluate how you think. I had to. I was quite a difficult person to ask for help of any kind. I found it quite difficult as well, being in a semi-medical profession, working in a hospital. You know, illness of that kind, any kind, was something that happened to somebody else. I didn't deal with it very well. I professionalised it, you know, because that was the way I thought I would get through it. I actually found out that I couldn't, and that I shouldn't have done that, but that was the only way I knew how. So it is a learning curve for you, your family, your friends, but I learned along the way that it took things from me. Yeah, I lost my hair. I had to have 6 months chemotherapy. My biopsy came back. I was told initially I wouldn't need chemotherapy. It came back. It was starting to be on the move, potentially invasive. It was a grade 2, therefore I had to have chemo and radiotherapy. I remember being extremely upset when I went to see the oncologist on the first visit. But he was excellent. He drew me a graph and said, if you can put yourself through the chemo, Julie, look what you're like with chemo. And it went off the scale. You know, you've got 90% chance of this not coming back, or between 1 and 2% if you have that and Herceptin, another drug which some ladies have to have. I had to, because mine was HER positive. I had the new Wonder drug, which I was very fortunate to have at the Royal Infirmary. Negative side of that, brought back into the chemo environment for that drug to be administered. I felt mentally I'd moved on, was strong. I then found out that I couldn't actually cope very well with going back into the chemotherapy suite. I got to the point of a very negative time of my life. I had had a serious bereavement at the time I had my cancer up. I'd lost my father, and I was coping with that, and I was trying to cope with dealing with cancer, and I just felt that actually I wasn't in control of my life anymore, and I couldn't get my foot through the door with fear and anxiety. So that came as a massive shock, because I wasn't in control anymore. You know, I felt the cancer had put me in a place I didn't want to be. Luckily for me, and this is why I'm here on Cancer Stories, because it's part of the cancer process, and it's something that has evolved from the team in psycho-oncology and Dr. Alex Mitchell, that I had wonderful support. I was able to offload about my fears. I was able to be realising that the things I was feeling, I wasn't alone. I think that's part of the sadness of a cancer journey, that with all the clinicians and the hustle and the bustle and the appointments that you're going to, and the wigs you need and the anxieties and everyday life still going on, it's a bit like a fast forward film, but you're stood there watching it all happening, being directed. You can lose it, and I lost it. And I'm not ashamed to say that or acknowledge that that was part of my journey. But there is help out there, and, you know, I took it, and because of that, I'm here now. I'm very positive about the mental and emotional health around any serious illness, particularly cancer, because that happens to be one relevant to me. And it's a positive step that sits alongside a medical treatment. So because of that, I've made friends, I've had different viewpoints, I've been able to see positives and negatives. And yeah, I have seen patients that have been terminal in clinics, and I have been able to speak to them. And I've been able to be a much stronger person because of that. I've been able to deal with my pain, my anxieties, my worries, my cancer. But in the main, you know, I've been able to hopefully help through this medium, this video diary, the cancer stories, other people, you know, like yourselves, who are going through any type of cancer.
I'm sure people will appreciate that, and I definitely think they'll get a lot from what you just said there. You're in an unusual group to be suffering more than the average. They spotted it, and then you were lucky to be referred. Or do you think that's the wrong way to think about it? We should be offering something for everyone who goes through that difficult journey. Well, what's your opinion on that?
I think that there are so many different types of cancer. There's so many different types of individual. I think for me, mine was slightly unusual in the way that I always say now, I have a phrase that I take with me always. And I used to use it before, and I modify it now because of what happened to me with the cancer, my personal situation. I say that, you know, sometimes you don't happen to life, life happens to you. And in my case, boy, did it happen. You know, I had a serious RTA which caused the death of my father on the very day that I came out of theatre from my cancer operation. Literally, he died in another hospital in the county as I moved forward with my changed life. That brought a lot of issues with it mentally, as you can imagine. But there are people out there who don't have big stuff going off in their lives. They have just, if I can phrase it in this way, just the cancer to deal with. But what happens about other people who, if you have cancer, it doesn't mean nothing else is going to happen to you. You know, you could be being divorced, someone could reject you, you can lose your job, you could have money worries, you could get another illness alongside the cancer. So there's all these variables going off around the cancer. I think it's very important that anybody who's undergoing a cancer journey from a diagnosis, not necessarily immediately, because I think these things kick in as you're going through the journey and your fears escalate in various ways, or depression may escalate. You're so busy on that cancer road, going down that road, you don't even know. All you can focus on is going down that road, keep going, keep going, keep going. That these things are building up behind you, a bit like a shadow that's coming up and up and up. You don't realise until it's actually overtaken you and it's surrounding you what is like a cloud, what is happening. And sometimes, you know, we're so good at hiding these things sometimes and trying to be strong that the clinicians won't even necessarily tune into it. I'd love for every patient there to be that support network in every hospital, particularly in Leicestershire, because obviously psycho-oncology is there as a small part. I'd like to see it become a massive part of cancer treatment, because the treatments sit side by side. And yet I don't think you can have one without the other because of the type of physical problems that are there that then generate the mental and anxiety, emotional problems for the treatments that people are going through. You know, I've met other cancer patients and they've spoken about their treatments, some of the head, neck ones, the brain ones, you know, the special things they have to wear on their heads and fixed in a certain place for long periods of time. It's difficult. It's not insurmountable, but I think until you're actually experiencing those treatments, those worries, no one knows how you're going to feel. And I think it's imperative that there's quite a big input there of psychological support in psycho-oncology attached to those units. You know, I'd love to see it national.
I think a lot of people would agree with you, but I have to put the contrary argument, just for a second, that psycho-oncology specialist services are often considered to be a little bit expensive in terms of personnel. Even employing a mental health nurse who can be brilliant could be a little bit expensive compared to something that was not paid for at all, somebody else doing the job, a frontline cancer clinician expected to do that as well. Is there some kind of compromise? And I know we've tried to develop certain things, for example, self-help materials, relevant resources like anxiety management resources, also the Cancer Stories program itself, peer support. These are things that could be less costly, but could be more widely available. Could they fill a gap themselves without requiring that classical face-to-face interaction? Or is that face-to-face thing, the support from another professional, the gold standard?
I think you can't move away from that. I mean, it won't be suitable for all types of patient, I guess. But I think in the main that, you know, every little helps. But I think if it's a win-win situation, I don't think I've spoken to one cancer patient on a peer support level, and I've speak to all different types of patients that has said, you know, the face-to-face support, the talking with the professional who understands mental health, emotional issues, you can't get better than that.
Okay. I'm going to come on to something new now, which is, what have you learned from this cancer journey and how have you changed? What's your reflection on all this time that you've spent, the ups and downs? How has it changed you as a person?
It made me reevaluate my life. In a way, I thought it was the most terrible thing that can happen to me. The most awful, terrible thing. However, I would say it's definitely made me stronger. I always say to anybody that I meet who's undergoing a cancer treatment or diagnosis, you know, cancer can take so many things away from you, but it can also give back if you choose to let it, to try and make a positive out of it. It can make you realise the negativity in your life. Maybe it will change you to prioritise things differently, like your emotional stuff. Maybe you weren't particularly a person who told people you loved and cared about that you did. You know, that's a very obvious thing to do. Maybe being a bit more selfish. Maybe all your life you've been there for everyone else, now it's time to be there for you. If you had any particular hobbies or desires that you wanted to do, you know, I did that. I decided to get involved as well massively with the cancer stories and cancer support. It's given me a friendship in that way. It's given me some positive things. It's made me also realise, you know, in a humble way, how lucky I am to be where I am, and if I am, not to be too maudlin about it, to get on and help in a positive, practical way, in any way I can, other people who may not be able to do that for themselves. I think as well, sometimes it does make you, it never goes away, I think, the fear and the anxiety around cancer. I think it'd be naive if you said that. But in the main, my whole life's changed since I had it. You know, I chose to, on a personal level, become single again. I prioritised different things. I moved house. I changed my job slightly, so I got involved with cancer stories, which I'm passionate about. It's made me do different things. On the whole, it's now been a positive experience, and you can make it that.
Well, that's quite remarkable.
I think you have to own it, you know.
You're taking more control of the situation.
Yeah.
And taking the positives that have come out of it as things that can influence your life in a direction that you weren't expecting, but still can be something good in a way. You mentioned a few times cancer stories, and I have to tell the viewers that you've been very instrumental in helping us get that set up and developed. While we're talking about it, I'd like to ask you, you've met quite a few patients as part of the Cancer Stories program, a few events we've had, and you've seen how people interact, the power of peer support in a way. What's your reflection on that landscape of peer support and what Cancer Story is trying to do? Because you've got a special insight into that, I think, compared to some other people who don't know what we're doing in this regard.
Well, Cancer Stories, I mean, as you know, evolved out of your work with patients, where patients were, feeling isolated and alone on their cancer journeys. The other thing I have to mention is that obviously speaking to some of the cancer patients, they felt very strongly that they wanted a voice heard. I think that they wanted to tell it warts and all exactly what happened to them. They wanted to give positives to other patients while showing some of the negatives. They wanted, as I did, I think, to express a view that, it's okay to feel like that. It's okay to kick the door and say, why me, and get very angry. It's okay to shout at the television because, there's a war in Africa. Well, so what? But I've just been told I've got cancer. It's all relative. I think that, we felt very strongly that we didn't want people to suffer in silence, which is why we have voiced what we felt along that way. And I think if you look at the blogs as well in the social media and things like that, people in the main are very, sort of interested in what goes on in other people's lives, good and bad. And it's out there. Nowadays, there's no shame in people knowing that stuff is going off in someone's life, whether it's being good or bad. And I don't think necessarily, the patients that we have on Cancer Stories feel that, they want celebrity status. It's not for that. We're not Hello Magazine. But what they want is, very importantly, to know, excuse me, I'm a cancer patient. If you didn't know, this is actually what it feels like to be told that. And because of that, perhaps I'd like you to treat me in this way. And because some of the stories obviously are shown to clinicians, associated staff, we felt quite strongly that lessons may be learned from that in how you deal with patients and families. Bearing in mind, all those stories are different. They're as unique as the people themselves, of how they dealt with it, the positives they got, the negatives they've got, how things moved on for them, maybe how things didn't move on for someone. And it's all in there, the sad times, the glad times, the bad times, the good times. And as you know now, we've also got now people coming in who are carers or have been carers of cancer patients, giving their story as well. So, they will obviously add to that pile of information. But in the main, everyone is so glad that they can share experiences. It's cathartic for us to get it out there. But the main thing is, it's a shared experience. We're all in that cancer club, whether we want to be or not.
You said something to me this morning that's made me think of something that's almost a slogan for Cancer Stories, which could be Cancer Stories, same but different, because everyone is different in their cancer journey, but yet there's a shared thread in what everybody's been through. The threat of the illness, the response of clinicians, and how everyone tries to get their life back to as good as they can, but within their limitations. And although we're respecting the differences, we also want to hear about those shared experiences as well. And it's a lot that comes out, obviously, of hearing many people's different tales, as you're saying. I want to ask you one final question here, which is about specific advice or tips that you might give to new patients watching this. We've done this in a lot of videos, and I think it's one of our best questions in a way, because it gives you the opportunity to speak to somebody who might be watching this new. Sometime in the future, somebody's going to tune in and see you now. Obviously, they haven't lived through every moment that you've gone through, and they're nervous, scared, worried about what they're going to have to face. They might have just been told the diagnosis They might be waiting for their first appointment. You know, there's every possible scenario out there. Have you got any advice or tips for people watching this?
I would say that in the main, try and keep an open mind, because with the best will in the world, and it depends what type of cancer it is, I'm speaking personally from breast cancer, you may have a lot of tests and you may be told that you've got cancer at the first appointment. Try not to think that it's going to be the worst possible one until all those results are through. I wrongly held on to the naive feeling that I wouldn't have chemotherapy, because I was told with what was medically available as evidence at the time that I wouldn't need chemotherapy. Then I had a very nasty shock when 6 weeks down the line they actually looked at the histology of the tissue they'd taken and said, oh, but you will. Try also not to think as chemotherapy is a very negative thing. It is a positive thing, although it's not a good experience. Some of the stuff they tell you is pretty frightening about keeping away from people. Mainly that is just to cut down risk of infection while your cells are depleted. And there are ways around certain things. Try and plan your life around that a little bit and just see it as time out. The other thing I'd say is try not to be a hero. I did know a gentleman that I made friends with in Chemo Suite who tried to go to work every day while he was going through the chemo process. Yes, work can be a very positive thing. It keeps you going, it keeps you routine. However, it can be quite exhausting, and sometimes it's your body's own way of saying, you've earned this, you need to just settle it. If you lose your hair, what I did was I went from this length to obviously nothing, and then Mr. Tufty. So I then decided I was going to go back to my punk days and have it spiky. And I know that a lot of ladies, or a lot of people and men, because it's open to them as well, had different wigs in different colours for mood. You know, try and make it an autistic experience. If you can bring humour into it, it will help you along. It's not always possible, but, you know, you can at least say, you know, you're not going to beat me. I nicknamed mine, you know, Charlie Cancer. You're not going to beat me, Charlie, because you're there, but you'll be going. You know, other people have done similar things. And just really keep going as best you can. If you feel anxieties and worries are building up, and you're not able to speak to your family about it, I would definitely try and get dialogue going about, you know, referral, maybe if things are very bad or getting worse, to someone in a team at any stage of the journey, at any nurse or radiotherapy, or even at the outpatients, about speaking about the psycho-oncology service, because that is a marvellous thing. They've got self-help tools, and it's a physical talking thing as well. It's not just let's walk through the Macmillan department, beautiful though it is, very professional though it is. Not everyone is going to be helped by being given a leaflet. It's not always about a leaflet. Some people will get good stuff from that, some people won't. For some people it might make it worse. They'll be looking at a leaflet, reading it, absorbing the wrong things, thinking negatives, and not being able to have someone explain it possibly through to them. And so in that way, you know, the help is there. So try and get support. Don't be too proud, you know, and keep going.
Definitely. You've given the answer slightly, totally understandably, from a Leicester perspective, where we do have a dedicated unit, and we've tried our best to promote the cause of psychological and emotional issues. But just out of curiosity, what if somebody's watching this in a less well-developed area, or in an area where there's disputes over what resources are available for psycho-oncology? What do you think people can do there in order to not be ignored? Should they be fighting for a service, which is a very tall order for an individual to do? You know, it could be a long-term objective. what they want is help for themselves now, isn't it?
Yes.
Could they go to their GP, do you think?
Well, for me, I didn't know how the service of psycho-oncology was made available to patients. On a personal level, I got a referral because I went into a meltdown in a clinic in radiotherapy. However, your GP can refer you across, I understand, to a psycho-oncology department, if there's one in your area, and various other professionals around that. And the other thing, of course, is if you haven't got access to that, one of the reasons that the cancer stories was originally evolved was because people are in isolation, because there may not be those facilities. That is available via a link on the web. You can just go in on www.cancerstories and see different people with different cancers giving tips, talking about their journeys, good and bad, it has to be pointed out. And you know, hopefully not feel so isolated and alone. You're sharing an experience, albeit not on face to face or side by side. You still have that connection with that person because you're sharing some of the same issues, worries and positives. And I think a lot of the people that have watched Cancer Stories, it's inspired them, even as patients who hadn't done one, to go on then and do their own to help others. So, you know, that was a natural progression, really, of what was going on, to try and reach out to more people.
Yeah. I really appreciate your advice to others, and I really appreciate you talking from your experience, because you have been involved in some of our programs and done a brilliant job in that regard, and I hope we can still work together. I want to just thank you on behalf of the viewers though for giving your own personal account of what you've been through. I think people will find it really helpful. So thanks for coming in today, and all the best.
Thank you. I'm glad to help.